There is a supernatural world that surrounds us, and sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. You'll hear stories about this and so much more. I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli, coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains. Our guest today is Corey. He's a rancher up in Montana. He's being bold and courageous by coming on the record because a lot of people won't talk about the subject which we're going to broach. And of course, I'm speaking about cattle mutilations. What are they? Who's behind it? Why is it ongoing? And why hasn't law enforcement brought anyone to justice in the decades that this phenomena is going on? So I'll bring Corey in a second. Here's a word from our trusted sponsor. Gold has surged 46% in less than a year, doubling the gains of NASDAQ and S&P 500. But this isn't just another rally. Global reserves are shifting, exposing cracks in the monetary system. Investors are losing confidence in paper gold and demanding physical metal, creating a massive gap between gold owned and gold available. But this isn't about how institutions broke yet another system. It's about how you can profit from it. Right now, Noble Gold Investments has a limited supply of investment-grade gold bars and coins available. As banks scramble to fulfill their obligations, pushing gold prices even higher, you can profit. Smart investors are already moving into physical gold. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for you to do the same. And right now, when you make a qualified investment, Noble Gold will add a free 10th ounce gold coin to your order. Folks, there's always a risk with any investment that you may consider, but don't wait until it's too late. Visit www.noblegoldinvestments.com and turn their panic into your profit. Again, noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com. We did it a couple of years ago, and folks, I'm really glad we did. noblegoldinvestments.com. Corey, thanks so much for coming on the record. Really appreciate it. And, you're a real stand-up guy for doing this. A lot of people just shy away from it. They don't want to talk about it, sweep it under the rug. The church, for the most part, and we're all part of a church here, folks, so we're not bagging on the church, but the church wouldn't even broach the subject. And yet ranchers like you, places where we've been in Colorado, New Mexico, other places, they're terrified. The fear factor is 8 or 9 on a 10-point scale. So tell us what happened up in Montana.
Well, I think it's been, last 9-10 years, we've had 7 or 8 cattle mutilations. I didn't know anything about, I'd heard about them before that, but I'd never seen one before until we had our first one. I guess ours are a little different than what most of the people I think that you've interviewed. I think most cattle mutilations, the scavengers and predators won't touch those carcasses. For some reason, ours, the scavengers will scavenge them, and ours seem to be animals that die of natural causes and then get mutilated after the fact for whatever reason. I think we had one steer that I know of that was mutilated and died from that, and then nothing would touch it initially. But everything else has been stuff that we've known has died, and then a day or two later, or 3-4 days later, it gets mutilated. And I don't know, I'm not the expert like you are, but I can't speak for the first one. But after that, I've pled the blood of Jesus over all of our ground and our holdings. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. The one steer that was mutilated and then most likely died from that mutilation, it was actually our fair and rodeo weekend, and the guy that I had doing the range riding for us at that time, he called me and said, "Hey, there's this steer that's dead next to the one water tank." He's like, "I can't get any of the cows up there. Oh, can you come drag it up or drag it off, tomorrow with your side-by-side or something like that." And he'd also said that, he was pushing these cows up. Everything kind of got up close, got downwind of this dead steer calf, and then they just scattered and bolted, which is a little unusual for cattle because they'll come up and sniff something, another dead bovine. But, they'll bellow and stuff, but they kind of ignore it after a time. These things want nothing to do with it. Well, his horse tried to unload it too when he tried to ride up on it. He couldn't tell it was mutilated. I didn't know till I got up there. He saw it, that it was, typical mutilation thing. And then it also had where its scrotum should have been, 'cause it's a steer. It also had a triangle cut out where that was.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, so I was hooking the chain up to it. And when the flies had come off of that spot. But, there wasn't any birds or anything on that one. So I hooked it up to the chain, and side by side started dragging it. We're basically on the side of the mount. There's kind of a trail or an old road. So I'm dragging this, trying to get as far away as I can, because not even that this calf's own mother wasn't there. There wasn't any cows for like 3/4 to a mile from this animal, which was unusual because there's supposed to be cattle up there.
Right.
We're all way away. So I started dragging, and eventually gets off the road, slides off the side. And just because of this, the terrain, I couldn't get pulled back up with the side by side. And thinking, this thing isn't far enough away from the water tank, and we really needed to get cattle up in that area. And so I unhooked it and started dragging it by hand down the hill with the chain. Got as far as I could go. It still wasn't far enough. And so I guess I prayed that, as I knew there was some, because we've known other, families that have had mutilations and know what, you can't get animals to come anywhere near them.
Right.
And so I prayed that, that God would wash away whatever evil was associated with this.
Wow.
Started hiking back up the hill, gotten side by side, and it's a pretty clear day. I mean, there's a few little clouds in the sky, but it's mostly blue sky. It's August. And I was probably in the side by side, and maybe start driving maybe about 2 minutes, and it just starts pouring rain. And it was pretty localized, because I asked my wife later, I said, did that rainstorm hit town? Because it was moving from west to east, and it should have hit the fairgrounds. It didn't. So, and I drove out of it within like a half mile, maybe. But anyway, the next day, the range rider said, well, the cattle are back at this tank. There's cattle over the hillside. He didn't push them there. And then I said, well, is there anything worth, scavenging on that calf? And so it looks like there's coyotes on. And then we were up there, I think 2 days later on horseback, and I stopped to look at that steer. And I could see where there's actually magpies on it. I could see where there's coyote scat. It was also black bear scat.
Oh.
It had been eaten on.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's definitely something spiritual with all of this.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this: was the one that you found, and you chained it up and dragged it, and then it slipped over the side and went down? Was there any blood in the animal?
No, he was right around the water tank. It's all kind of dry, beaten down ground, no vegetation right there, because the cows are using it all the time. There's just some old cow tracks. There's no blood, no fluids, nothing. And I don't know how it had got there. I don't know if it was dropped there, was mutilated there, or what.
But there was no blood on the animal. No blood in the animal. No blood in the animal.
Well, not that I could see. There's no blood on the ground where it had been cut, or
you would see blood.
Area.
You would see blood. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It sounds like the classic mutilation. Did anyone see any lights in the sky or anything like that?
Not that time. This is up in the mountains, though. Okay. So it's a ways away from. Yeah, I know my wife. The first mutilation had. He was a little later that fall. I think she had seen like the typical UFO, the Tic Tac looking thing.
Okay.
Up in a different area. But I haven't seen a UFO other than, I guess, that whatever that thing is I sent you on that picture. On that other cow that we had a trail camera on. I guess that dead cow. But my mom, it was 2-3 years ago. She was taking my dad to a doctor's appointment on the highway. It was like late morning. It was during the day anyway. And I think it was an orb or something. She thought it was going to hit her car. It came flying down the highway, and she ducked as she was driving and just flew right over the windshield and was gone.
One interesting aspect to your story is after the cow goes down, starts sliding down the hill, whatever, and you go down, then you pray over it. And all of a sudden this rainstorm comes out of nowhere. I find that I've never heard anything like that before, but I find that a very interesting dynamic of a story. It's almost like the Lord is just washing the residue of evil from the animal. That's really profound. And then in doing that, then the magpies, coyotes, and bears, start doing the cleanup. That's because a lot of times, at least what we've heard and studied over the years, nothing touches it. Nothing will touch the animal. Scavengers won't get, and coyotes will eat anything. We've got them up here. I mean, if you leave a lunch bag with just wrappers in it, outside here, the next morning it's all torn apart. The coyotes will go after anything. So the fact that coyotes didn't touch it, the fact that the other animals have moved away from it, want nothing, goes stampeding down, your horse won't get near it, speaks volumes to me. I'm just going to throw this at you and get your opinion on it. Is it possible that these entities who handle this thing, they're wicked, in my opinion, and I think you would agree. They are wicked, they are evil. And so that aura of evilness clings to the animal. There's like a residue there, supernatural residue. And you pray, and this storm comes out of nowhere and washes everything clean, washes that residue, and the whole dynamic changes. What are your thoughts on it? I don't think that's a coincidence. I might be reading too much into it, but I don't think so. No clouds in the sky. All of a sudden you get this downpour. I don't know.
Yeah, there was some clouds, but there wasn't really rain clouds.
Right.
I mean, storms come up quick in our part of the country, but not that quick. It caught me totally by surprise. I mean, usually you can see storm clouds coming, and you've got you have half hour, 45 minutes before you got to get off the mountain. There's lightning. There wasn't even any lightning with this either, which is unusual that time of year. Because usually that whole area is like a lightning magnet. So, but yeah, that's what I think. It was washed clean by the good Lord.
I agree. I agree. I mean, you're an upright, stand-up guy that loves Jesus, and this thing happens, and now you push back, and the Lord answers. And interesting.
Yeah, and because everybody else I know of, I've even got a friend that used to be a deputy sheriff back in the late 70s, early 80s around Conrad. He's somebody else you should talk to too, but he's got all kinds of stories about UFOs and cattle mutilations, horse mutilations and stuff. And he's always shocked at ours that they die and then mutilated, because I think he'd only ever heard of one other one like that. And that seems to be the MO for ours for whatever reason, is that they die and then other than that steer, then they're mutilated.
That's really true.
Later. Yeah. And they get scavenged on. But I know other people that they, like what you've always talked about, they're mutilated and they just rot. Nothing touches them.
Nothing just
violet,
right.
Ooze. So,
wow. So, folks, sometimes after the cameras go off, we get stuff that's like, and this has happened before, where someone will, like Corey, the person we're talking to, will add something, give a story. Tell us what happens when your uncle and the gentleman he's riding with come down this mountain. What did they see? Tell us, pick up the story.
So this was back in the 60s when my uncle was a teenager. They come riding off this mountain, side of the mountain, to go check on cows and this drainage. And here's this cow, dead cow, slung up way up in this tree in the fork of this fir tree, dead. And they have no idea how the heck she got up there. My uncle turns to the hired man who's older than him and starts to ask, what do you think did that? And the hired guy's already beating it up the hill on his horse and turns and says, I don't know, but I'm getting out of here. I won't find out. So
wow.
Ever since then, we've called that thing park, because the thing hung the cow on the tree. There's still some bones there from that cow.
So how high was the cow up in the tree? 20, 30?
He said she was about, I think she was about 8 feet.
Okay.
Up in the tree. They called her goat horn because she was an old Hereford cow. It was pretty cranky, but she had one horn that was tipped up like a goat's horn. So.
And obviously a cougar or two cougars together, that's not going to happen. And you've got mountain lions up there, but
mountain lions don't do that. No. That's like a leopard or jaguar type thing, and that's too heavy for them.
What about your bear?
bears don't do that either.
Right.
The bears bury things just like the mountain lions do.
Was the cow mutilated or didn't he see?
He didn't. All he said was there were some birds that eaten on her. Otherwise, she was pretty much untouched. The other night he heard, well, I think it was, he couldn't remember the year. He was telling me this several years ago that I think it was in its early 70s. He was riding in that same area and he'd heard some vocalizations that he didn't know. I may even tell you what they weren't. And then about that same time, he ran into an older guy this was like in July or something, ran into an older guy that was up there fishing because this is national forest. And the guy had a lever action rifle with him, which is really unusual for at that time, and even now, because they didn't have grizzly bears back then. We have a few now.
Huh.
But just seeing somebody with a rifle, and Uncle asked, because he's about his 20s then, he asked the guy, he's like, what do you have the rifle for? And also the guy had said, well, there's strange things up here, and I don't go anywhere without a rifle up here.
Wow.
I know I heard some vocalizations about 4 years ago, just down from there. Really kind of like a roar, howling thing.
That sounds like, I was going to say, what the cow, this might be an answer. One thing I would say, maybe 2 Sasquatches picking that thing up and putting it in a tree. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
In the population.
This last year, him and his friend were bear hunting lower on the drainage on our place. They were up on this one knob where we go sit. You can glass this whole area for black bear. I guess my wife and I think we're in Missoula or something for one of my daughter's tennis tournaments.
Okay.
But anyway, my son said when he first got there, he heard what he thought were dogs down creek bottom, barky, which is unusual. I mean, there's no dogs in there. And he said something like 2 or 3 of them. He said for 15 minutes, they're kind of working up the creek.
Oh, boy.
This gets weirder as it goes, but he said eventually they quit barking and he heard what he thought was this gray jay or a camp robber, a bird. But he said it sounded like gray jay, but it sounded like something imitating gray jay.
There you go.
Makes sense.
Right.
And so they're sitting here and then this gray jay slowly, they can't see it because there's another ridge, it's timber. So this gray jay sound keeps going up the ridge for another 10, 15 minutes. It gets up kind of above them and across the basin. There'd been birds chirping and stuff. All of a sudden, all the birds, everything just goes silent. And then my son and his friend weren't really talking a lot or communicating much. And all at once, my son just had this overwhelming dread come over him. Just sick to his stomach, and he turns to his friend. He's like, we got to get out of here. His friend had the same thing a while later. Same thing hit him too. And you're like, yeah, we just want out of here. They'll stay there till well after dark. And he got on the 4-wheeler and just left. His friends, that feeling of dread and just absolute terror is what it was. Left him by the time they got to these old buildings. My son's episode didn't end until they got to the next gate. And then they started talking about the way back home a little bit and found out that they're both experiencing the same thing at the same time. And then he talked to my mom that night for a long time, and he got a hold of my wife, or his mom, I guess. Talked to her till almost midnight. We were in the motel room because he was so shaken up by the whole thing. But
I would say this, that from what I understand, all my research with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, it's exactly what they do. They can kill you. This is conjecture, but they can kill you. And what they felt, what your son and his friend felt, is that feeling of dread. I'll tell you a story. You can tell your son this. There's a woman that has communicated with these beings, and this is why it's a mixed bag and it's weird. And I get that. So the family of Squatch, they're up in the mountains, like you, and she goes up there and visits them, and they allow her to come in. She's unarmed, and they allow her to come in, and so she goes and visits them, and she's telling these 2 firemen, big strapping guys. They're fire guys. I mean, we're not 90-pound weaklings. These are guys in prime of life, and they're in shape, and they can hike and the whole deal. So they're joking around. making fun of this thing and, acting kind of macho. And they get up there and they are so terrified, she said. They turned around, they both started crying like little kids and ran off the mountain.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you hear stories like this.
Yeah.
This it's nothing to fool with. Absolutely nothing to fool with. Here's the good news. You're protected by the blood of a lamb. And, and that's, we're going to be going someplace on Resurrection Sunday, and we'll be exploring. As the first thing we do is ask the Lord for divine protection, because I am not equipped to deal with any of the stuff that's out there. I'm not, but He is.
No.
He is.
Yes.
And that's
yeah, that's what I figured. No gun's going to protect me like the blood of Jesus is.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Now, we'll add one thing to that story too. Is that my son, I had tons of questions after this, and I've watched some of Scott Carpenter stuff because I've been curious about a lot of this. And I was telling him that, they can imitate different things and different sounds. And so I found this vocalization tape that Scott Carpenter had, and we're just listening. I wasn't trying to match it up or anything, just showing him that they could do different things. And we get to the last one. He's like, that's the dog thing you heard. He's like, that's exactly what I heard. He's like, and to his credit, it does kind of sound like dogs kind of barking in the distance, but it's like these swooping calls or something. And that's what he thought was the 2 or 3 dogs that were in creek bottom. There it is, those whooping calls.
I think, just so you know, Scott Carpenter called me up, and I've gone public with this before, and the cameras are rolling. Scott Carpenter called me up about a month before he passed away. He said, "Hey, they're coming across the property lines, and they're banging on the house." And so we prayed. A month later, he dies of a cerebral hemorrhage. He stands up at the dinner table. Yeah, in my opinion, they took him out, and there's some other stuff that goes with that. I won't go public with it, but
yeah,
all I can tell you is, without the blood of a lamb, without the protection of the Lord, and in my opinion, these are the beasts of the earth. These are therion, what we read about in Revelation. A lot of people scoff at that, but as the late Russ Dizdar says, these are not hamsters and giraffes. And the feeling of dread, I mean, could you imagine if they had stayed there? I mean, God forbid. So, whack. Wow, Corey, folks, there is a supernatural world. I'll say it again. I mean, it surrounds us and it's manifesting. I mean, the number of Bigfoot sightings have gone up through the roof. You go back to the Gimli Patterson film, 66, 67, where they're out there trying to film, and that's real. I've gone over that frame by frame. That's the real deal. When she turns like this, I mean, that's the real deal. But since then, the sightings have gone through the roof. They've multiplied. So in my opinion, these are the beasts of the earth. And, your son got near it. It was terrified. I mean, frozen in their tracks, basically. We've got to get out of here. And they heeded the warning, which was smart. I'll give you the last word, Corey. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I just think people need to educate themselves. It's amazing how many, Christians just deny that any of the supernatural stuff is happening, and they're going to get caught off guard eventually. So just do your research, like you said. So,
amen to that. Thanks for coming on the record. Thanks for being such a stand-up guy and bold and courageous. We appreciate it. And folks, you should appreciate it too, because not a lot of people come on the record and talk about this stuff, but it's real and it's not going away. So the church needs to buck up. Thanks for watching.